Hey guys, welcome back. So we've got another round of leaks from the 4.10 tech preview build. We've got massive nerfs to several ballistic repeaters and deadbolt cannons in 4.9, an absolutely insane buff to the C788 cannon in 4.10, references to something called Escalating Claims inside the item recovery system, new instancing files that appears to be connected to Battaglia, and updates to Stormwal assets. Now none of these changes are huge on their own, but together they start to paint a picture of what CIG seems to be focusing on. So let's go through everything we know first, and then I'll give you my thoughts on what I think these changes could mean. Just keep in mind that these are leaks and datamined findings, so while the files are real, their final implementation could still change before release. Now let's start with the 4.9 PTU updates because this is where the biggest combat changes began. If you're someone who enjoys running ballistic weapons, including myself, these numbers probably aren't going to make you very happy. The buzzsaw repeater has had its alpha damage cut from 36 down to 18, which is a 50% reduction. The sawbuck was hit even harder, dropping from 54 to 24, and the shredder, one of my favorite weapons in the game, wasn't spared either, losing around 44% of its alpha damage. The deadbolt cannons also received major reduction across the board. The size 1 dropped from just over 202 damage down to 120. The size 2 went from 303 to 140. And the size 3 was reduced from roughly 455 down to 225. In other words, almost the entire early deadbolt family has effectively had its alpha damage cut in half. Interestingly, not every ballistic weapon was nerfed. The Jian Yen2 repeater actually received a small increase, going from 36.45 to 41 damage, which is about a 12% buff. Moving over to the latest 4.10 tech preview build, things become even more interesting. Most of the larger ballistic weapons received relatively small adjustments. The Wrath cannon lost around 3% of its alpha damage, the 85B Gatling was reduced by roughly 5%, and the larger Deadbolt 4 and 5 cannons were only reduced by around 11% and 7% respectively. But then there's the C788. This thing didn't just get a buff, it got completely reworked on paper. Its alpha damage jumped from 325 all the way up to 1200. That's an increase of roughly 270%. Now, before everyone rushes to hit C788 on everything they own, remember that alpha damage is only one part of the equation. We have fire rate, ammunition, projectile velocity, range, armor interactions, and any future balancing all play a role in determining whether a weapon is actually stronger overall or not. We don't yet know how this will translate into real gameplay, but it's definitely one of the most eye-catching changes in these leaks. Outside of combat, another interesting addition appeared inside the item recovery files. A new variable called Escalating Claim has been added. Right now, that's really all we know. There isn't enough information in the files to say exactly how the system is supposed to work, so I don't want to jump to conclusions. If I had to speculate though, it could be related to discouraging repeated insurance claims or introducing increasing penalties for constantly reclaiming ships and equipment. That's purely my interpretation based on the name though, so don't take it as confirmation. We also found something interesting related to instancing. There's now a dedicated settings file for Siege of Warsin's instancing, and a very similar file has appeared for Battaglia. What's particularly interesting is that Battaglia was recently added to the 4.10 roadmap as a new mission giver, so seeing these files appear could simply mean CIG is preparing the technical side of those missions. Whether this points toward larger instance missions related to Battaglia or simply back-end preparation is impossible to say right now, but it's definitely something worth keeping an eye on. And finally, we also have updates to Stormwal, the space whale of the verse. A large number of textures and models have been updated in this build. Now, asset updates don't necessarily mean content is coming in the next patch. Developers update art assets all the time during production, but it does tell us that work is continuing behind the scenes, and Stormwal clearly hasn't been sitting untouched. This is also an indication that alongside Genesis and the Nyx system, they are also working on creatures as well. So combine these two together, and I think next one, when it comes to the verse, even with or without the animals and the creatures, I think it's gonna be a sight to behold. But unfortunately, it was delayed, so we just have to wait and see when they finally implement it into the game. Now, if you look at each of these changes individually, they're actually pretty easy to dismiss. A few weapon balance changes here and a backend variable there, some updated textures, a couple of new instancing files, but when you zoom out, a pattern starts to emerge. Over the last several patches, CIG has consistently been investing in systems that support a more persistent universe: engineering, cargo improvement, item recovery, backend technology, mission infrastructure. And I know what you're gonna say. A lot of these systems don't work, and we had to pause these systems, or like pause any additional features, just to make the game stable enough to be able to function. However, assuming that they are working on these fixes and 4.9 is going to start becoming a more stable build, then we could take a look on what they're trying to achieve. Together, they're gradually building the foundation for the game they ultimately want Star Citizen to be. That doesn't mean every balanced change is going to be popular, and it certainly doesn't mean every decision is the right one. I completely understand why players who enjoy ballistic combat, including myself, are frustrated after seeing another round of significant nerfs with no particular reason in mind. At the same time, it's also possible that CIG is trying to move combat toward longer engagement where engineering, resource management, and crew coordination have more room to matter. We won't really know until we see how these changes play out in the PTU and beyond, and whether or not these systems will actually work. So those are the latest findings from the 4.9 PTU and the 4.10 tech preview builds. As always, remember that these are datamined leaks, and everything we've talked about today is still subject to change before the final release. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about the ballistic weapon changes? Do you think CIG is moving combat into the right direction? Or do these constant balance passes make it harder to invest in a particular playstyle? And what are your thoughts on the C788 buff and the new Escalating Claims systems? Are you excited about any of the 4.10 leaks? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay updated on all the leaks, information, PTU updates, gameplay, and deep dives on Star Citizen, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. And thank you guys so much for watching. With that said, I'll see you guys in the verse.